Hey, let's do that take two, except this time let's unmute my mic before I go ahead and start and do it with so people can actually hear me. Isn't that great? This is episode 9 of the GDO show. I've done this 9 weeks in a row now. That's incredible. Like no sign of stopping now either. Um, I'm I've been thinking about doing it more than just once a week, to be honest, but at the same time, like once a week is usually pretty good for me, I think. But either way, 9 episodes deep is a lot more than I thought I was gonna get when I started. So I'm just happy we got it going. So um, that being said, we're gonna be talking about One Piece again today. Today I'm gonna pick up where I left off at the end of the Barati arc, and then we'll continue going forward. So if you're a fan of One Piece and you want to join in on the discussion and drop some stuff in the chat, feel free to do so. If not, then sit back, relax, and don't turn that dial. So without ado, let's begin. It's the GDO show. And once again, we have the quiet intro. It's gonna be like that for the next little while, I think, just because I always say, like, you know what, maybe I should get around to doing it, but I never do. So it's like, yeah. So, like I said, um, today we're going to be talking about One Piece today. Um, this is the start of where I consider One Piece getting good. Uh, the beginning arcs are really slow, and there's like not a whole lot of character like interaction going on. Um, all the characters never really have a chance to bounce off each other because there's not a whole lot of downtime. And there's not a whole lot of them because at the beginning it's like, well, you have Luffy, Zoro, Nami, Usopp, and that's it. And then there might be like some side characters that are happening like here and there, but I mean, other than that, it's pretty much it. So starting at Arlong Park, this is like starting at Arlong Park is where the series starts to just like get really good because it's got like more emotional moments and it's got more I don't know, it's just got more emotion to the series, you know. So I'll be talking about that a little bit more in depth as we go along from arc to arc. So that's pretty much for the intro. Um, this past week, I don't really have too much to talk about this week. Um, I guess I've been spending a lot more time in streams than I have been streaming, but at the same time, it's like at the same time, like I don't know. I feel like sometimes I stream and sometimes I don't, but you know, it's just the way it is, kind of thing. But I have been looking for more excuses to stream, and honestly, streaming 2E speedruns is good and all, but it's like I don't know. I just feel like I want to stream more casual games lately. Like this Ocarina of Time ROM hack I've been playing just recently. I'll talk about that in a sec, and other stuff. Zelda randomizer, and like other than and just like casual games. I just want to stream them, but I mean, that's just how it is, right? Um, the other thing with that is like I don't know if it's like I'm going to keep it going that way, but I mean, that's just how it seems right now. So I'm fine with that, but it's like you never really know the time I'm doing it. I mean, I usually like when I work, I get off work at like 3 o'clock usually, 3 o'clock Pacific, and then if I come home, I'll like do some watching streams or whatever in the evening or night, and then maybe I'll stream like in the night, but Um, but I mean, when I don't work, I just kind of turn on the stream whenever. I don't have any sort of stream schedule or anything like that. So I just kind of do whatever, right? So, but I don't know. It's just like watching runs is just so much easier than doing runs. Plus, I don't practice, and it's like, yeah. So, either way, I've been doing a lot of that this week, so I'm happy with that though. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I mean, if my time of like going hard on TUI is over, then I mean that's just the way it goes, I guess. Pass on my enjoyment for the game to other runners, and then just become a teacher instead of an actual runner. Plus, there's also TUI Bingo, and I did one of those, and I was so rusty. I was so rusty. I did it with Mumbo Token earlier this week, or sometime last week. I don't remember when we did it, but it was bad. It was really bad. Like, I just like didn't know what I was doing at all. But I don't know. It's just funny how it goes. You don't do it, and then eventually it just kind of pans out. So the last yesterday and today, I've been playing through a Legend of Zelda ROM hack called Nimpe's Adventure or whatever it's called. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's basically just like a pretty generic Zelda ROM hack. It's got it's got a lot of redone everything, and I think it's really fun. I've been having a lot of fun with it. Um, Obviously, it's got varying levels of difficulty. Uh, Depending on where you're going, but for the most part, it's been pretty hard. So I've been having a lot of fun with it. I'm probably gonna continue streaming it after I'm done the show here because I was streaming it before and now I'm streaming it after. And sorry if you watch from YouTube, but you'll have to tune into the stream to see stuff like that. So again, I'll say it again at the end of the show like I always do. But if you're watching on YouTube, it's twitch.tv/garage door opener, same as YouTube except the O is an O, not a zero. So it's garage door opener. That's pretty much it. So that's all I really had to say. Now that I have the EverDrive, probably want to start doing more ROM hacks, but it's hard finding ones that I like because I mean, if you're not looking for like Ocarina of Time or Mario 64 ROM hacks, I mean, it's hard to find anything else. Um, I'm sure there's a lot of ROM hacks of Mario Kart and stuff like that, but it's just hard making ROM hacks for a lot of N64 games. So I'm not really looking too positive on that one. There's also Banjo Dreamy, which I haven't played, and I'm sure there's other ROM hacks of, like maybe there's bad ROM hacks of Banjo. I don't know what exists out there, or other N64 games that could be fun, but I don't know. I kind of want to get into the ROM hack world, but not so much Mario 64 ROM hacks because I just really don't care about Mario games that much. TBH. I don't know if I'll get into like other ROM hacks talking about Pokemon and stuff like that, but I mean, it just depends on what the stream. Again, like streaming 2E is like generally what my audience is, and I love running the game, but I just never find myself practicing, and I just feel like it's a waste of time if I'm doing runs without any want to get better. It's hard to improve when you're not trying to improve, you know? So that's pretty much how I feel about that. So I don't really have anything else to say about ROM hacks. This week has been pretty uneventful in terms of what I've been doing, so I'm just gonna leave it at that and move on to the next one. So, to start off talking about today's topic, One Piece from Arlong Park to Reverse Mountain. There's a whole lot to cover in Arlong Park because Arlong Park was the first arc that was like it was the first story arc that was a lot more involved. Like the characters weren't all together, they got to an island, they did stuff together. This time, like there's a whole lot of different things that happened at different times, and they just kind of all met up together at once. So, so I mean, I guess the first thing to talk about is what happens first. So Zoro and Usopp and uh, I think it's Johnny all go ahead chasing after Nami because she left the Barati, right? She was like going home to her village, and she stole the ship. So after Zoro got cut down by Mihawk, they instantly left and left Luffy and Sanji to take care of Don Krieg. So while they're on their way, um, they get noticed by some fishmen, and Zoro is tied up on the boat because he can't because like he was doing something dumb in the boat and they didn't want to knock it over or something like that. So Zoro got tied up. So um, Usopp and Johnny they run away and Zoro gets captured by the fishmen. So Arlong is a merman pirate and he he owns this village. So Zoro gets captured and gets taken back to Arlong's base and gets thrown in prison. So Arlong leaves to go. Arlong leaves to like. I don't actually remember exactly what happened, but anyway, while while Arlong and like the main pirates of the crew are out, Zoro just like slaughters everybody in Arlong Park and like just like starts to leave. But he gets caught by one of the fishmen named Hachi, who he's a main one of the main pirates of this arc. He's one of the he's the swordsman of the crew, and he's like it's hard to describe his character. He's like a really dumb character, like just really oblivious. So he sees Zoro and he's just like, "Oh, hey," and he's like, "Hey, I'm looking for Arlong," and he's like, "Oh, well, he's not here, so let me just take you back to the city." So he takes him back, meanwhile not noticing that literally on the other side of the wall, there's all of his crewmates just like cut up with swords. So Zoro escapes, and Hachi goes back to Arlong Park. So meanwhile, Usopp is Usopp and Johnny they go off to the town, and Usopp runs into some mermen, and he tries to fight them, but he gets knocked out by this woman with blue hair, who introduces herself as Nojiko, and she's Nami's sister. So Usopp gets saved by Nojiko and gets taken to um, her house, kind of. So um, meanwhile, Sanji and Luffy are still in Barati. So when they leave, and this is like the first big main scene of the arc, is the explanation of what the warlord pirates are. And I went over this last episode. Um, Basically, Yosaku explained to Sanji and Luffy exactly what the warlords were, and he explained that Mihawk was a warlord, and he explained that there's a fishman warlord who was part of the same crew as Arlong. So Arlong is basically like extremely powerful. So don't mess with Arlong. So um so they all make it to Fishman Island, and or not Fishman Island. They make it to the way to the village, Kokoyashi village, and they come across this big sea cow and named Momu, and Luffy just takes it out. and and together they use it to like go back to the village. So, I mean that's just like that's just how it is. So, Usopp or Arlong goes to one of the villages to start harassing them, and Nojiko tells them basically about all the fishmen. So Arlong and his men go to the village, and Usopp attacks Arlong and runs away. But he gets caught. So um, so he gets caught and taken back. So during this time, this is when Nami helps Zoro escape. Basically, she she like cuts his ropes, and then she cuts up all the fishmen, and then he leaves. But then Usopp gets dragged back to Arlong Park, and Usopp learns that Nami is one of Arlong's crew. Like, she's actually one of, like, part of his crew. And he's like, oh, how could you do this kind of thing? So Arlong is doubting Nami's uh, allegiance to him because he knows that she hates him. And so Arlong tells Nami that she needs to kill Usopp. And Usopp is just like, and Nami's like, well, that's just the way it has to be. So Nami stabs Usopp, and he falls into the water. And everyone's like, aha, so this is the way it works. Johnny sees Nami kill Usopp, and he's just like, so he runs away, and knows just that. But then it's revealed at the end of the episode that Usopp is still actually alive. He's walking around the village in a cloak, being like, "Ooh, I'm a ghost. I'm a ghost." So all this has happened. So Zoro is just kind of off doing his own thing. Usopp gets fake killed by Nami, and then Johnny witnesses all this happening. So Luffy and Sanji appear at the village. They finally arrive, and they run into Johnny, who tells them that Nami killed Usopp. And Luffy gets really mad because he's just like, I don't believe you. She's a good person. So then Nami appears, and Nami tells Luffy, I killed Usopp, by the way. And he tells her, or she tells him, hey, leave the island. So, and Luffy is just like, no. He's just like, I'm just gonna stay on the island, and that's it. So, Luffy basically just sits down on the side of the road and takes a nap and is like, I'm not leaving the island, you can't make me. So that was like, I mean, that's the first time in the arc that Nami tries to get Luffy to just stop caring and go away. It's like, it's kind of a, hey, like, I have my own reasons to do this, and I don't want you to get involved with my reasons. So please go away. Let me take care of everything myself. You guys were fun to hang out with, but I'm done with you guys now. I was just pretending to be your friend so I could, try and steal your treasure because I'm a thief that steals from pirates. So Luffy doesn't accept that, and he just lies down and goes to sleep. So Nami walks off, and Nojiko walks up and they're all together. I forgot to mention that. So they're all together. So Nojiko walks up and basically tells them exactly what happened to put Nami in this situation. So Nami and Nojiko as sisters had a mother named Belmare who was a marine who basically saved them one night, and then they became like her daughters. So, long story short, Arlong comes to the village one day and demands that in order for everybody to live, they have to pay a certain amount every month at the start of every month, or else they die. And Belmare doesn't have enough money to pay for herself and Nami and Nojiko, so she uses the only money she has to pay for Nami and Nojiko to live. And Arlong is like, well, that's very noble of you, and then he shoots her. So so like this was a heavily edited scene, of course, in the 4Kids version because there's no death in 4Kids. There's no death. Nobody dies. So what happens is instead of like in the silhouette scene that's like really powerful where Arlong's standing in front of Belmare with the gun to her head, um, he's just like it's changed so he's just like pointing and is like you're gonna rot in our dungeon for all eternity kind of thing. And it's like, oh. So the scene is really emotional. It's probably the first time like you ever kind of felt that during the series, at least for me anyway. Like with Zoro's flashback, it's sad and all, like Zoro lost his like rival and childhood friend. And then I mean Sanji was stuck on a island in the middle of nowhere with Zeph, and they basically starved to death. But this time with Nami's flashback, it's kind of terrible the way it happens. So it's definitely an emotional scene for me anyway, and it kind of adds on to like the character development for Arlong, because Arlong is just like he's Arlong is a pirate of the Grand Line. Like he is very familiar with the world of the Grand Line, and he just wants like I don't know, he just wants power. Like Arlong is a power hungry pirate, but he's also smarter than Don Krieg. So Nami as a child has a talent for drawing maps. She's studied cartography and she's basically like read from books on like how to draw maps. So she has lots of maps of the island that she's drawn. So Arlong sees her map of the island and says, "Hey, your skill would come in handy to my crew." So he basically takes Nami and drags her back to Arlong Park and is just like, "You're gonna be our map drawer." So eventually Nami comes back to town after being kidnapped by them, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, are you all right?" And Nami's just like, "Hey, look at all this money I have, like that the pirates gave me. Doesn't this make it better? Haha." And meanwhile, everyone in the town, except for Genzo, who's like the mayor of the village, I guess, he's just like, everyone's like, "Wow, I can't believe you're like selling out your morals to these pirates," kind of thing. So Nami basically runs back to Arlong Park crying, and Nojiko in the town like doesn't like her. So, but that's not really true. They know that she's just kind of trying to put on a brave face. So Nami runs away and is basically like, "Okay, I'm stuck." So Arlong makes her a deal that she will that if I can't remember the amount of money. If basically it's Arlong will sell her back the village so she can own it for I think it's 10 million berries. It's either 10 million or 100 million. I can't remember. I think it's 10 million. So Nami basically like spends her entire childhood just stealing gold and coins from people in order to raise the money to basically buy back her village. And this is why she became a pirate thief, because she needed all the money to pay back her village. So Nojiko finishes telling her story, And the rest of them are like, well, sounds like we need to fix this. So that's pretty much the whole thing. And Nojika's just like, guys, this is the island's problem. Please don't get involved. So a Marine officer visits Arlong one day and is like, hey, and this Marine officer, you only see him like a couple times throughout the series, um, but he looks like a mouse, and it's just like, was it only two? It wasn't 2 billion. It wasn't 2 billion. 2 billion berries is way too much. But yeah, anyway, this mouse-like marine guy comes to Arlong and he's just like, "Hey, so Nami's getting really close to like paying off her debt, like she almost has enough." So basically, Arlong tips off the marine dude that Nami has a hidden stash of money, and like Nami goes home after leaving Luffy's crew. I figured you were referencing Austin Powers with the 2 billion berries. Anyway, Nami goes back to her house after leaving Luffy and the crew, and finds that the Marines are like rooting around in her orchard because they own a tangerine orchard. So Nami's just like, "What are you guys doing?" And she's like really, really, really pissed. So 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 the Marines find her hidden stash of gold coins, and she's just like, "Hey, what are you doing? Like, this is mine." And she's like, "Well, these are stolen goods, and we're confiscating them." So Nami gets incredibly angry and runs back to Arlong and is like, "Hey, you you promised, like, what are you doing?" And Arlong's like, "When did I ever break my promise? If you make the money, I will pay back the village." And she's like, "You're a liar, you're a liar." And he's just like, "Hey, when did I break my promise?" So so Nami runs away again, and the part that I forgot to explain is that Nami pretended to kill Usopp. She stabbed the back of her hand, and that's why Usopp was still alive with the rest of the group. He just kind of ran into them and was like, "Yeah, so she actually just stabbed her own hand to make the blood appear, and then tossed me into the water." So anyway, that was backing up. I just kind of lost track of that. So anyway, Nami runs away and goes to the town and was like, "Hey guys, it's just gonna take a little bit longer. I can buy back the town eventually, like I promised." And meanwhile, the town is like, "Okay, so we've seen you suffer for all these years, and we've just like done nothing, and now it's and now it's our turn to go like attack Arlong Park. It's like he's done all this stuff to you and we can't like let it go." So Nami's just like, "No," because like she knows that like the villagers are no match for the mermen. Like they're stronger in every way and they'll just all die. So she tries to convince them like, "Please, please don't go, like there's nothing you can do. Like I promise I'll get the gold." And meanwhile, like Genzo is just like, "It's okay. It's okay to cry. Like we'll handle it from here." And then the crowd just like rushes off to Arlong Park and leaves Nami just sitting there. And this is the first scene in the anime that is really, really like like you just look at Luffy, and normally Luffy's like this stoic character. Well, not stoic. He's this obnoxious character who just like always just like never is serious. He does fights and stuff like that, but I mean like, and I mean he knows like his right from wrong, but this is the first like time where he just like does nothing. So Luffy Luffy is just standing there behind Nami, and Nami breaks down and she starts stabbing her tattoo. Nami has a big Arlong tattoo on her left arm, and she just starts stabbing it over and over with a knife because she's just tired. Arlong has taken everything away from her. All her life, she's been ruined by it. She can never escape them because if she runs away, then that means Arlong's going to kill everyone in her village. And she's just in this really, really terrible spot. So she breaks down, and the entire arc she's been telling Luffy, go away, I don't want your help, I want nothing to do with you. She starts stabbing her tattoo, she starts throwing dirt at Luffy, like, go away, and then she finally just through tears of like her eyes are full of tears through all of it. She finally doesn't say anything and turns back and just says, "Luffy, please help me. Like please help me." And so Luffy gives her his straw hat, just puts it on her head and is just like, "You're damn right I will." So So the walk to Arlong Park is another really good scene. Basically, it's just like this scene of Luffy, Usopp, Sanji, and Zoro all walking in a line to Arlong Park. And it's just really cool the way it's done. Like, I don't know, it's just a really good scene. Like, this episode is just like one of the best episodes ever. Like I said, it's just it's just really emotionally powerful, and that really hasn't been seen anywhere in the anime up to this point, except for like in maybe the flashbacks and stuff like that. So they all walk to Arlong Park, and Luffy busts down the doors, and Johnny and Yosaku are standing there before they get there at the entrance, and the villagers are like, "Hey, we're going in there to beat the fishman," and Johnny and Yosaku are sitting there with their swords crossed in front of the exit, saying like, well, actually, we already went in there and tried to do that, but they just like beat us up and tossed us out. And we know that there's more powerful dudes in there, so we're not letting any of you guys pass. There's only one group that can beat these guys. So Johnny and Yusaku won't let any of the villagers in. But then, of course, the Straw Hats show up, and you know, all hell breaks loose. So Luffy busts down the doors, and Zoro reveals to them that it was him that cut up all the mermen in the place. And well, I guess they're fishmen. Mermen are slightly different. Zoro cut up all the fishmen because Hachi knew the name Zoro, because Roronoa Zoro is a really famous name in One Piece. Like everyone knows who that is, but Hachi just didn't recognize him when he met him. So he's just like, Zoro cut it up. And then he never revealed his name at the time. So anyway, now the fights begin. So the characters in Arlong Park are like pretty standard. So I already went over all the other Straw Hat characters. I guess I can talk about Sanji a little bit because I didn't last week so much. So Sanji only ever fights with his feet, and I should have mentioned that last week when Sanji was introduced, but I'm just really bad at it. I'm doing it now because this is like the first time in the series where pretty much the main Straw Hats are together for the beginning of the series. The East Blue arc is kind of all together. So Sanji is a chef. He comes from the Barati, which was obviously the restaurant, but because he uses his hands with knives and to cook and stuff like that, it's part of his and Zeph's policy that if their hands were ever ruined, they wouldn't be able to cook again. So in order to get around that, he only fights with his feet. So that's how that works. And Nami obviously uses a bow staff. She used it since the beginning of the series, but I never really talked about it that much. Again, he's basically Regal from Tales of Symphonia, yes, except Sanji's way cooler than Regal IMO. so, and then of course Usopp only ever uses a slingshot to attack. That's pretty much how that goes. So, in the start of the fight, basically Hachi's like, come out, Momu, and he like brings out the giant sea cow that Luffy already took out once. So So Momu sees Luffy, and immediately he's just like, he starts sweating, and he doesn't want to attack because he already got punched and beaten up by him once before at the beginning of the arc. And so he's just like, So eventually Arlong threatens Momu to attack him, otherwise he's gonna, make it even worse. So Luffy gets the good idea to plant his feet in the cement and grab Momu and just start swinging him around like Arlong Park. So he basically takes out a bunch of the mermen, takes out Momu, and that's pretty much it. But now he's stuck in the cement, so Arlong's like, well, uh, okay. So Arlong grabs the cement and just like digs it out of the ground with his hands and then throws it in the water. So Luffy's basically stuck underwater. And he can't do anything because he's got the devil fruit power, right? So he can't move. So they're just like, well, Luffy's gonna drown, so we need to fix that. So Sanji tries to dive into the water to get him out. And this is where the fight starts. So Arlong has three main officers. There's Chu, who's this blowfish, I think. He's got like these really big lips, and he just basically like sucks up a bunch of water and shoots it out into like a water cannon kind of thing. That's the way he fights. Then there's Hachi, who is an octopus swordsman, so he fights with six sword style. Um, Ryok Toryu, I think he calls it. And then there's Kurobi, who is basically Fishman Karate Supremo. Like he's just a master of Fishman Karate. And there's a few characters in the series who use Fishman Karate. Later on in the series, Jinbei, who's one of the warlords, he also uses Fishman Karate as well. But Kurobi is the first person in the series you see use it. So Sanji dives into the water to try and save Luffy, and Kurobi's just like, well, I'm gonna jump in after you. So he jumps in after, and basically he has like this underwater fight with Sanji. So Sanji holds his breath for like an amazing amount of time underwater in these episodes. It's actually insane how like unrealistic it is, like that they held their breath this long. And I mean that's just the way anime works, I know, but I mean it is what it is, right? So Sanji eventually gets the idea. Well, I mean, first off, Kurobi can move really agile in the water because he's a fishman, and Sanji isn't. And Sanji can't really kick or anything in the water because, like, the the motion through the water just slows him down. So he's basically at the mercy of the fishman. So Kurobi like goes to town on Sanji and basically like high speed drops him to the bottom of the lake or bottom of the water that they're in. And this like kind of like starts rupturing Sanji's ears, like the pressure just gets to him, like he's bleeding from the ears and stuff like that, and it's amazing that he can still hold his breath through all this. But eventually Sanji gets the idea that because Kurobi is basically a fish and has gills, if he blocks them, Kurobi will have no way to breathe. So he gets really close to him and like covers his gills, and Kurobi just starts choking, and so he's forced to like go to the surface. So Sanji gets out of the water, and he's just like, alright, you fish bitch, like, get out of the water right now. Like, we're gonna fight on land. And Kurobi's just like, well, if you thought that I was weaker on land than in the water because I'm a fish, you were wrong. And then Sanji proceeds to just absolutely obliterate him, like, out of commission. Like, it's like the most one-sided thing ever. Like, the way fight, yeah, an interesting thing I noticed from this arc forward, the way fights go is somewhat formulaic. They always start fighting the small fries usually by the dozens, then the mid-bosses, then finally the big bad. I mean, that's kind of how it works, and I mean, it's a good go, and I mean, they did that before, too, because in the beginning they fought, like, all the little chefs, then they fought Gin, then they fought Don Krieg, and before that they fought all the Kuro pirates, then they fought Butchie and Hachi, or Butchie and Sham, I mean, and then they fought Kuro and Django after that. I mean, it's always the same formula, and it's the same thing. Like even in the Buggy arc, they fought the clown pirates, then they fought Moji, then they fought Kabaji, and then they fought Buggy, kind of thing. So it just kind of always works out that way, just because like that's how it goes. So anyway, Kurobi gets kicked through Arlong Park by Sanji, and he's out of commission. And then Sanji jumps in the water and starts. Sanji jumps in the water and basically like pulls Luffy's head out of the water. And he sees that during the fight with Kurobi, Genzo and Nojiko have already started. The process. So Nojiko basically has Luffy's head fully pulled out of the water, and and Genzo is like pumping his lungs so that he's actually breathing. I have Pirate Warriors 3, but I've never played the original for the first two. I have it on Steam. So anyway, while all this is happening, Zoro gets called out by Hachi, who's like, "All right, I didn't know who you were before, but I know who you are now, and what you did to like our crew is like unforgivable. So I'm gonna take you out." So Hachi starts attacking Zoro, and he attacks him with the six sword style. Now, at this point in the series, um, at this point in the series, Zoro is still recovering from his wound from Mihawk because that literally happened the same day. So Zoro still has a gigantic gash down the front of his body, and so he can't really fight properly just because he's like in this constant pain, right? So so Hachi keeps like attacking Zoro's big wound and just like injuring him, and he's like, "All right, well, this isn't gonna do anything." So Zoro does what he can do, and he's like, "All right, I need two more swords because his swords broke before." So Johnny and Yosaku throw them his swords, and Zoro's just like, "All right, so I got three swords now." And the move that Zoro uses against Sanji when he first gets the other two swords is like really cool. He just kind of like worms his body like throughout Hachi's tentacles, and just cuts him up. And I always thought this looked really cool. Um, it's in the One Piece Grand Adventure game, I think. That's like his dodge like counterattack move, and it's just really cool to watch like in the anime. So anyway, Zoro and Hachi have a bunch of like back and forth moves. Like Hachi always throws this stuff at Zoro, and Zoro just kind of like responds by countering it, kind of thing. And that's how the fight goes. Like there isn't really a whole lot that goes on in the fight. Um, Basically, it's Zoro just like trying to live while Hachi's fighting, and it's probably like my least favorite fight that Zoro has, just because of like how bad it is. I mean, like Zoro uses his basic like signature attack, his Onigiri attack, eh, like in against Kabaji, and that's like as far as that fight goes. And then he uses his other attacks like as it goes on. But I mean, when he fights when he fights Hachi, it's like I don't know, he doesn't really do anything. He just like does a move, takes a breath, does a move, takes a breath, does a move, takes a breath. So, I mean, eventually he uses his Tatsumaki and finishes off Hachi, and he goes flying, and then that's the end of that fight. So, earlier on in the fight, um, Usopp Usopp makes Chew mad, and basically Chew's like, "All right, well, I'm gonna fight you," and he's like, "Not if you can catch me," and he basically just runs off. So Chew is chasing Usopp around the village, and he's just like running away because that's just like Usopp's just a coward, right? So he's just running away. So eventually he like turns to eventually he turns to fight, but it's just such a weird fight the way Usopp fights because he like fakes Chew out with like a rubber band, like he pulls it back and then Chew just like goes to like wince or something, and then Usopp just like runs away. So Usopp eventually hides in the woods, and like Chew is really mad at this point, and he just like sucks up this water and starts like just destroying the trees with it. Meanwhile, Usopp is like freaking out, and it's actually a really comedic scene. Like Usopp is 100% a comedic character. Like you can't really take him seriously a lot of the time. So watching the fight is kind of like it's funny, but at the same time, it's just like it's it's just funny, and that's it. So anyway, Usopp uses a slingshot to cover Chew in wine, and then from there he lights it on fire, and Chew basically bursts into flames. And then Usopp just hits him on the head with his hammer like a billion times, and then he passes out. And then he is about to come to, but then Usopp's like, "Oh no!" And then he beats him over the head with the hammer again. So it's it's pretty funny, but it's also like not that great of a fight either, to be honest. So anyway, Luffy eventually gets like when Sanji finishes his fight, he goes down and breaks the rock that's keeping Luffy at the bottom of the water, and he breaks the rock and Luffy escapes, and so Luffy's turn to fight Arlong now. And this is probably the longest fight that's happened in the anime, I think, so far. Because, I mean, most of it is just like. I mean, I guess it's not that long. Like, it's. It's really hard to describe, like, how long the fights are. Because, I mean, sometimes they'll be like 2, 3 episodes long, but then other stuff will be happening. So, basically, it's just like. At the beginning of a lot of Luffy's fights, it's just like a bunch of comedic things. It's a bunch of um, it's a bunch of comedic things that happen, but then it's just like I can't even think of the words for it. Like the fight bounces back and forth between serious and non-serious. And I mean that's not a bad thing, but I mean it really makes you lose track of like how long everything is. So anyway, so Arlong bites Luffy with his teeth, and basically Luffy like is like, wow, those are sharp. If I got rid of his teeth, then he wouldn't be able to fight me. So Luffy gets Arlong in the face and knocks his teeth out. And Luffy's like, aha, now I can attack you. So Arlong's like, well, I can just grow more teeth, so like a shark can. So he just like grows more teeth, and he like takes his teeth out, and he starts like attacking Luffy with these like claw teeth. And I mean, the fight isn't that interesting. Like it's got some stuff in it, but then eventually Arlong goes up to the roof and brings down his sword, and I don't know, it just doesn't make it any better. Like sure he's got the sword, but it's like whatever. So anyway, Luffy eventually winds up on the top floor of Arlong Park, and he sees all the maps, and he sees all the drawing tables, and he sees all this stuff, and he's just like, "Hey, wait a sec. This is this is Nami's room." Like, and Arlong is like, "This is where Nami will continue to make maps for me until like the end of the time or the end of time because she's my slave kind of thing." And Arlong's like, or Luffy's like, "Well, she's a crew member, like she's a crew member, right?" And she's like, "No, she's really a slave." And it's like, "Oh, well, that doesn't fly with me." So Luffy starts kicking all of the kicking all the tables out and just completely wrecking the room, just like slamming all the maps and just destroying the room. And meanwhile, Nami's looking at all of her stuff flying out of the room and is like just kind of in awe, like, wow, like what's going on? Like, meanwhile, Arlong is super angry because like all of these maps of his are being like thrown away. So he's like, "Ah, what are you doing?" kind of thing. So Luffy's just like, "Well, this room shouldn't exist anymore. Like, yeah, this room shouldn't exist anymore. This room is what like Nami hates. So I'm gonna destroy it." So Luffy goes to destroy the entire building and is just like, all right, I'm just gonna take it all out at once. So Luffy goes to, use his Gum Gum Axe move, which is just like slamming his foot down like from really high. And Arlong's like, you can't do this, and he goes to bite Luffy's leg, and he like bites deep, but I mean, Luffy just like slams his foot down directly on Arlong's face. He falls 5 floors down to the bottom of Arlong Park, and then the entire building just completely collapses in a heap. And then everyone's just like, oh no, what happened to Luffy? And Nami's all worried and stuff like that, but they're like, you gotta get away from the building, it's collapsing. So everyone escapes, and Luffy stands up like from the broken wreckage of the Arlong Park and is just like, and he's just like, hey Nami, are you still there? Are you listening? And she's just like, yeah. And he's like, he screams out the line like, you are my nakama. And that just makes Nami like break down. And it's definitely like Arlong Park, definitely from the beginning, like up until then, it's definitely an emotional roller coaster for Nami. Like Nami goes into the arc like completely careless. Like she obviously cares for Luffy and the rest of the Straw Hats because like she doesn't want them to like get involved because she doesn't want them to get killed by Arlong. But then eventually Luffy's just like, trust me. Just trust me. Just trust me. I'll make it better. And so basically she just does eventually, and Luffy goes and beats up Arlong and all the scary fishmen pirates, and then that's it. So Arlong's defeated. Arlong is probably like, I don't know if I said this before, but Arlong is definitely my favorite villain now out of all of like the beginning villains. Um, Simply because like Arlong is like, he's really devious and crafty, but he's also really smart too. Like he's not just like I don't know, he's just greedy for money. Like Arlong loves money, and so he'll just do anything for money. And that's why he just wants the money from all the villagers too. So anyway, then there's a big celebration in the village. Everyone has a big party, and there's lots of food that goes on. And I mean, that's usually what happens at the end of like every One Piece arc. There's usually a big feast of some sort. And then after that, Nami has her chat with Nojiko over Belmare's grave, and they're just like, we did it. We did it. They're finally gone. We finally did it. And then then yeah, then they leave. Uh, Luffy is ready to leave the port, and he's just like, well, Nami said she was, wasn't gonna stay, so we'll see what happens. So Nami basically runs through the crowd, steals all of the wallets from everybody who lives in the city, and jumps on the pirate ship. And as they're sailing away, they're just like, hey, my wallet's gone. Damn you, Nami. This one last time. And meanwhile, they're all just like, man, it sure is good to see her happy. So it's a really funny, like, it's a really funny scene because everyone's just like, man, it sure is good to not have to worry about dying to these pirates anymore. And then meanwhile, it's just like, oh man, Nami's like finally happy. Ah, but she still stole our wallets. Hey, Starry, how's it going? So after the events that happen at Arlong Park, the Marine who the Marine who stole the money, um, he goes into Arlong Park to like do this and that, and he basically gets I don't remember exactly what happens to him. I can't remember if he gets punched by Luffy or something. But anyway, Luffy gets a bounty on his head, and this is Luffy's first bounty. As a pirate, he gets a bounty put on him of 30 million berries, and it's just spread around the world. As a result of beating, I think Buggy, Don Krieg, and Arlong, he gets the bounty put on his head because he basically defeated all the powerhouses in East Blue. Um, the fight against Kuro never happened because Kuro isn't alive according to the world government. So, so the fight just, I mean, no Marines were involved there, but I mean, obviously everyone saw that he took down Buggy and Don Krieg because news spreads around to that. So Luffy gets the highest bounty in East Blue, and Shanks celebrates the news with Mihawk. um, basically, Luffy and Mihawk are like looking at his bounty, being like Mihawk being like, "Hey, I met that guy," and meanwhile Shanks is like, "Oh my God, you met him!" And like he's like drunk off his ass, and I mean, yeah. So that's just the way the East Blue arc kind of ends. There's one more arc that I'm going to talk about just now, but I mean that's pretty much how it goes. So basically, out of all the villains in East Blue, to give a recap, um, obviously Arlong is probably the best one in my opinion, or he's the best one. Buggy, I know I said Arlong was a favorite, but Buggy is definitely my favorite villain. He just has like Buggy is just an amazing character in general. So it's just how I feel about that. Um, Kuro arc, don't really care for it that much, but it had some good parts and bad parts. Arlong Park, definitely the first best arc in One Piece. If anyone, whenever I'm like recommending people watch One Piece, I just say you just gotta power through the first arcs. If you don't like One Piece after you've finished the Arlong Park arc, then you probably won't like the rest of One Piece. Because once you get to like that big emotional swing in Arlong Park, that's pretty much how it goes. So, following the bounty episode and leaving Arlong Park, there's a little filler arc that happens where Buggy gets his, where Buggy, it's basically a 2 episode filler arc of Buggy meeting up with Alvida and getting his body back. So, um, that was just a cover story arc, and I talked about a little of it earlier, but I mean, Alvida is like still the same dumb character she was before, and I mean, Buggy's fine, but I mean, he's got his body back and he wants revenge on Luffy, so that's basically how it goes. So that's Arlong Park. Um, Definitely the longest arc in One Piece at this point. I think all the rest of the arcs were maybe 9, 10. Like how big was Brody? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It was 12, and Arlong Park is 3, 6, 9, 12. It's 15. So I mean it's only 15 episodes, but it's still like it is what it is. So anyway, Logtown. So basically, um, now that they've finished Arlong Park and they have everything their crew needs, so there's Luffy, then there's their swordsman Zoro, who is Luffy's first mate, and then Usopp is the crew's marksman. He is the shooter or gunner. Then we have Sanji, who is the chef on the crew, and then we have Nami, who is the navigator. So Nami she knows all about like currents and tides and this and that, and she likes drawing maps, so she's the navigator. So they decided to go to Loguetown because Loguetown is directly on the way to the Grand Line, and they thought, well, maybe we can see some things there. And Luffy is excited to go to Loguetown because Loguetown is where the Pirate King, Goldie Roger, was born, and it was also where he was executed. So Luffy wants to see the execution platform, as everyone would. So they land at Loguetown, and Luffy is like, alright, I want to see the execution platform. So he runs off to go do that. And while he's looking around for the execution platform, it's also found that Buggy and Alvida and the rest of the pirate crew are also in Loguetown, and they're looking for Luffy as well. So they're just kind of chilling around. There's also a side cut to a new character, another Marine captain who's becomes a very main character. Like the only Marine captain you meet before this is Marine Captain Morgan, who is from the first arc where Luffy meets Zoro. And then I think the mouse dude that made the deal with Arlong, I think he was a Marine captain as well, but I can't remember. But anyway, the Marine captain who's stationed at Loguetown is named Smoker, and he has a devil fruit power that lets him turn his body into smoke. So very, very powerful. Smoker is the first character in the series who's introduced with a Logia devil fruit. And I don't believe the different kinds of devil fruits are really explored much this early in the series. But there are three kinds of devil fruits. There's Logia devil fruit, which are the most powerful, which basically let characters manipulate their entire bodies into certain things. Smoker can turn his entire body into smoke, and that's just part of the Logia. The second devil fruit power that you can get, or the devil fruit type, is called Paramecium, or Paramecia. And Paramecia devil fruit powers simply... It took me an embarrassingly long time to understand Smoker's powers. I thought he was riding around on snow. Please. Paramecia devil fruit powers allow people to manipulate their bodies in certain ways. So, for example, Buggy's devil fruit power, where he can split himself up, or Luffy's devil fruit power, where he can stretch. Those are both different kinds of Paramecium powers. They're not turning their body into any sort of elemental whatever. They're just manipulating them a little bit. And then the third devil fruit power, which we don't ever see at this point in the series, is a zone fruit. And zone devil fruit powers allow their users to become animals, basically. The zone fruits have three different ways. There's either full human, full animal, or a hybrid of between them. And there's all sorts of models as well. Like you could have like a certain type of animal, but then a certain breed of animal, and that's been seen a couple times throughout the series. And then it's not really shown too much, but there's also things called ancient zone fruits, which aren't ever revealed until way later on. A character, I think the first character who has an ancient zone fruit is X-Drake, who makes an appearance in Sabaody, and he has the ability to turn into a dinosaur. So I'm not really sure if the ancient zone fruits are like on their completely own separate level, but there's not a whole lot known about devil fruits because Professor Vegapunk, who researches them, has not been yet shown in the series to this point. Anyway, so Smoker has the ability to transform into smoke, and he doesn't like pirates. So he is obviously always on the lookout for pirates because Loguetown is a big pirate hub for people who want to go to the Grand Line. He's usually the one who has to stop them. So, meanwhile, Zoro is in Loguetown looking for some swords because his swords were both broken by Mihawk, and he needs three swords. Like, that's just the way he fights. So Zoro finds this sword shop, and he runs into this woman in the sword shop named Tashigi, who's who basically knows all about swords. So so Zoro has his one sword, the Wado Ichimonji, and Tashigi basically like goes crazy over it because she's like, this is a crazy sword, like, you need a good sword. So Tashigi's own sword is really good, and she goes to the sword shop to pick it up and runs into Zoro. And Tashigi's dream is to relinquish all the swords of the world, all the named swords of the world, from evil people, because swords are very important to her. Like, she just loves the make and look of swords. So when Zoro asks her, well, are you going to take my sword away? She's like, oh, well, I mean, good people can have swords too, so I mean, it doesn't really make a big deal. So, I mean, she doesn't know who he is, but I mean, like, yeah. So the sword dude basically tries to shill Zoro on swords, saying like, hey, this sword is, really expensive, like it's really good quality, and he almost like rips Zoro off, but then Tashigi is just like, this sword is actually like pure garbage. And the sword master basically gets all upset and is like, well, if you're gonna ruin my sales, then I'm just gonna like, I'm like, if you don't have any money and this woman is just gonna be like talking down on my sales pitch, then I'm just gonna treat you away. If you only have that much money, just go into that bin of crappy swords and just take one. So Zoro starts feeling around in the sword bin, and he's just feeling around, feeling around, feeling around, and he grabs this one sword that he has like this pulsing feeling in his head, like this sword is the one I want. So he pulls it out of the cheap sword bin, and Tashigi goes crazy about it because she instantly recognizes the sword. She carries around a little book that has like all the named swords. And the sword that Zoro pulls out is the Sandai Kitetsu, which is a famous named blade, and it's a very, very expensive sword. And so the sword master is just like, well, it's in there for a reason. Like, the reason the reason being that everyone who has ever used that sword has just died a terrible death. It's a cursed blade. And so Zoro's like, well, I really like this sword, so I'm gonna buy it. So we're just gonna see if the curse like holds up. So Zoro chucks the sword into the air and holds out his arm, and he's just like, well, if the curse holds true, it's gonna cut off my arm, but if not, then I'm gonna buy it. So Zoro tosses the sword up, and the sword like plants itself like down into the ground at its hilt. Like, it's really sharp. And Zoro's fine and is like, well, I guess I'm immune to the curse, so I'll take it. So Tashigi and the sword master, or the sword shop owner, are basically like, they're basically like, oh my god, I can't believe it. And so the sword master is just like, you know what? You look like a real swordsman, so I'm gonna go grab you a treat. So he goes upstairs and comes down real fast with a sword that he got from his mantle, and he said, this is a sword that's been handed down from the through my family. And he pulls the cloth off it, and it's a sword called the Yubashiri, which is basically, it's not quite of the level of named blades that the Sandai Kitetsu or the Wado Ichimonji is, but it's the next level down. So, because there's three level tiers of swords. There's the 12 name blades that are like of supreme quality. Then there's the 21 blades that are like of pretty, like really good quality. And then there's like the 50 blades or something of like pretty good quality. So Yubashiri is among the 50, but both Zoro's Wado and the Kitetsu blade are both of the 21 name blades. So Zoro walks out of the shop with both of these swords, and then he just like walks off. um, leaving Tashigi in the sword shop. So there's two filler episodes that happen that I'm not really gonna talk about because they're just filler. But I mean, it's just like the Usopp filler, and then there's the Sanji filler. So when Usopp's in town, he buys a new like goggles. They're like these zooming lens goggles, and that part I'm pretty sure is not. I'm pretty sure he just buys it from the shop, but in the anime, this bounty hunter's daughter buys it for her dad as a birthday present, and then Usopp basically like, hey, I need those, and then he ends up getting into a fight with the bounty hunter, and the bounty hunter's like, well, I'm gonna kill you if you don't prove that you're as good at aim as your father was by shooting this little target. So, because the bounty hunter obviously knew who Yasop was. So anyway, Usopp proves him right, gets the goggles, and walks off. And then Sanji there's this giant elephant tuna that's in the market, and he wants to buy it, but it's a prize for the cooking competition, so he has to win the cooking competition against this woman named Carmen, who's been looking for Sanji ever since like he was a child, because she was on like the ship that Sanji that I don't know, something like that. Or she read about him in the newspaper or something. I can't remember. I don't really remember exactly the story between Carmen and Sanji, but it's basically Sanji wins the cooking competition, and he gets the tuna. So they go back. So anyway, Luffy's been running away from Smoker because I mean Smoker obviously wants Luffy's head, and so Luffy loses him, and Luffy finds the execution platform. So Luffy gets up on top of the execution platform because he's like, I want to see what the view is like. And while he's standing at the top of the execution platform, Buggy comes down and locks him into place with like a thing, with like a locked thing. And basically the entire plaza gets armed by the Buggy clown pirates. So Luffy's kind of stuck there thinking like, man, this kind of sucks. So so Buggy does his speech and everything like that, and all the Straw Hat crew like eventually find their way into the plaza, and they start beating ass. Like they start trying to like get their way through the crew because they see Luffy's in trouble. So there's a storm brewing, it starts raining, it's all like really, really epic and stuff like that. And everyone's just like, oh man, Luffy is actually gonna die because Buggy is about to cut his head off. So Buggy lifts his sword to cut off Luffy's head, and as he's swinging the sword down, like Smoker's watching from the sidelines with Tashigi because Tashigi is actually Smoker's sergeant major, and he's like, nah, we're not gonna get dealt with this. We'll just let pirates deal with pirates, and then once all the bloodshed's over, then we'll sweep in and take out the rest. So as the sword is swinging down onto Luffy's neck, this is like one of the iconic moments in the series. Luffy just smiles with this gigantic grin and is just like, "Hey guys, sorry, I'm dead." And as the sword is about to cut into Luffy's neck, the sword blade that Buggy's holding gets struck by lightning, and the execution tower fully collapses. And the execution tower just fully collapses, and Buggy is just like fried because he just got struck by lightning. And meanwhile, Luffy's just sitting there being like, well, that was really lucky. And so it's actually one of those things that you don't think of a lot, but I mean, Luffy basically getting struck by lightning there doesn't affect him because his body's made of rubber. So you don't really think of that now. You don't really think of that now, but I mean, later on in the series you will. And I mean, I'll probably get to talking to that in, not, maybe in 3 weeks we'll get to Skypiea and Jaya, but, at the time, it's like something that's really crazy. So anyway, Smoker, also thank you for the host, PG. For uh, for anyone tuning into the stream now from PG's host, I'm just talking about One Piece today. Of course, from the title, we're talking about Arlong Park through to the end of the Reverse Mountain. So anyway, so after that's all done, Luffy's like, "Hey crew, it's time to go. Like we need to go." So they start running out of the square. Now, meanwhile, Smoker is like in awe because he remembers like when the Pirate King died like years ago. He also smiled at the execution platform, and to the very end, right as he died, he never stopped with like this giant grin. So, um, basically, Will of D is strong in this one, whatever. So, as they're running through the town back to the ship, they're like, "We need to get out of here." So Buggy and Alvida and their crew, they start running away because Smoker's on the way, and basically they get caught. And Luffy's crew is running away, but then they run into Tashigi, who is standing in the middle of the road, and everyone's sitting there being like, what do we do?" And she's like, "Hey, I want to talk to Zoro, like right now. We're fighting right now." And Zoro's like, "Well, actually, I can't do this right now." And she's like, "I will not accept this." So Luffy tells Zoro like, "Hey, well, we're gonna go on ahead, so catch us when you can." So they all run away. So Tashigi, it like the thing I really like about this scene, and the thing I really like about in general in the second part of Logetown is that the scenes where it shows just like the pouring rain is really powerful because it's like this dreary, dreadful time where like there's just it's just really down, and so it's like it really sets the mood. So, of course, Zoro, who I didn't mention this the first time, but when Zoro runs into Tashigi outside the sword shop the first time they meet, um, Zoro confuses Tashigi as Kuina because the two look almost exactly the same. They both have like exactly the same look. And basically, without her glasses on, Tashigi looks like an older version of Kuina does. So Zoro is just like repulsed looking at her because it just brings back those memories of Kuina. So Tashigi challenges Zoro to a sword match because she's like, "I didn't know that you were Zoro, like Roronoa Zoro, when I first met you, but since I know this now, I can't let you have those three swords. Like I can't let you walk out of here with those swords because you're an evil man." So Zoro's just like, "Well, you can try taking them from me, but I'm not going to give them up so easily. They were a gift." So Kuina tries to fight Zoro for the swords, or Tashigi tries to fight Zoro for the swords, and it is completely one-sided. It is completely one-sided. Like, Tashigi just isn't a match at all, and she almost gets cut by Zoro, but he stops just in the nick of time, and Tashigi just sits there like, she knows that Zoro could have just killed her right then and there. So Zoro starts to walk away, and Tashigi's just like, "Why did you stop? Do you think it's because I'm a woman that I can't like that I can't like that I can't fight? Like, why would you spare me instead of just like walking away like that? Why didn't you finish me off?" And Zoro's just like, "You know what? I can't look at your face. Like, you're saying the exact same things. Like, when I was young, I knew this girl who looks exactly like you, and you're copying her, and stop it." And basically, like, he basically goes off on her for looking like Kuina, and that she says the same things that she used to, And Tashigi is like super offended by this because she's like, I'm my own person. Maybe she was copying me. Like, either way, like, I don't deserve this treatment from you. So Zoro just runs away because she can't, like, he can't look at, he just can't look at her. Like, it's just not a thing. So, and I mean, the fight was already decided anyway, so, I mean, she just wants to go on. So, Zoro runs to catch up with the rest of the group, and Luffy runs into Smoker, who's just like, alright, I told you I wasn't going to let you go to the Grand Line, and I meant that. Like, we're going to settle this right now. Because the first time Luffy made it to the execution platform, he got into a little tussle with Smoker, but... So, Luffy tries to punch Smoker, but obviously, Smoker, he just turns his body into smoke. Like, there's nothing he can do. It's a completely one-sided battle. There's absolutely no way Luffy can do even connect to Smoker. So they do this for a little bit, and then Smoker's weapon that he carries around is a jite that he carries on his back. I don't actually know what the weapon is called. It kind of looks like, it's not really a jite, but it kind of is. Like, is it? I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of the weapon that like Raphael uses. Yeah, I just looked it up. He uses a weapon called a Nanashaku Jite, which is like, which has a tip on it that's made of sea stone. And I think this is the first time sea stone is ever mentioned in the series. Sea stone is basically this special mineral that emits the energy of the sea. So if anything touches this mineral, it basically is like a devil fruit user would, it would be like they were underwater. So with the tip of the jite, he has it on Luffy, and he can't do anything. His power's sapped, and he's like, I told you you'd never get away from the Grand Line. So all of a sudden, there's this gigantic windstorm that just blows everything away. Like it's like this giant windstorm just blows Smoker away, it blows Luffy away, it blows everything away. Like, all the nets that were keeping all the Buggy pirates down, they all go away. Buggy and Alvida escape from the Marines, and then eventually the Straw Hats make it back to the ship, all in one piece. Meanwhile, Buggy makes it to his ship as well, and it's basically the biggest Deus Ex Machina like that happens in the series at this point. And then you see a character revealed who's in this green cloak with this big face scar, and Smoker calls him Dragon. And so Dragon is basically like, he's just this character that appears. Nobody really knows what happened or if it was a devil fruit power or whatnot, but basically this character named Dragon just basically saves Luffy, and basically he's able to escape. So Luffy is back on the ship, and it's time to go to the Grand Line. Buggy is like, okay, we need to chase after Straw Hat. We are going to the Grand Line after him. And then Smoker and Tashigi are like, this defeat is terrible. Like, we are going to chase Luffy to the Grand Line. Like, we are going to go to the Grand Line after him. Like, we are not taking this lying down. So on the way to the Grand Line, they pass the lighthouse, and that points in the direction of the mountain, and they all make a vow. So everyone in the crew decides this is what their dream to come true. So that was really bad wording, but I couldn't think of any other way to say it. Luffy declares that he's going to become king of the pirates. Zoro declares that he's going to become the greatest swordsman in the world. Nami declares that she's going to draw a map of the world, which is her dream. Usopp wants to become a brave warrior of the sea like his father. And then Sanji's dream is to find all blue, which is... I forgot to go over that earlier, but I think it's not super. I mean, it's kind of important, but it's kind of not really. Like basically all basically there are four oceans in the world, and I forgot to mention this. I'm actually going to show a diagram of this because this will help in the next arc that I have. So let me just quickly bring up this image here. So all blue is an ocean where all the fish of the world are supposed to swim because there's four oceans in the world and each one has different fish in it. So here is a map of the world. So anyway, Sanji wants to find this all blue because it's like a chef's dream to be able to find it's basically a chef's dream to find all the fish. So I'm gonna quickly bring up this image to talk about the next one. But first, I want to talk about. So anyway, they all go off to the Grand Line. They say their dreams, and then that's pretty much it. So now there is the worst filler in the series that literally everyone hates. I don't know a single person who likes this arc. It's definitely the worst arc in the world. So there's this arc called the Warship Island arc, which is basically there's this girl named Apis who has a devil fruit ability where she can talk to animals. And she's hiding on this island a dragon. And I'm just not gonna talk about the arc at all. It's not really worth about it. But I mean, the villain in the arc is named Eric, and he has this devil fruit ability that lets him create these little blades of wind from his fingers. And it's just a terrible arc. Like the writing is bad, and then just everything about it is bad. Like I really don't like anything about it. So I'm just not going to discuss it. It's completely filler. There's only one part of it that is filler, and that's on their way to the Grand Line, the crew accidentally sails into the calm belt, which is very calm, and they get ejected by the sea monsters that live there, so the Sea Kings. So before I talk about Reverse Mountain, I'm going to bring up the map of the world because this is very important when I discuss it. So I'm going to quickly cover my split so I can talk about it. So in the world of One Piece, there are four mountains here, and I'm actually going to bring up a little text bubble so you guys can see. Let's see. Let's make it red. Excuse me for the Windows sound. Okay, well it's white, whatever. Okay, so there's four oceans in the world. You have North Blue, East Blue, South Blue, and West Blue. And I don't know if those are where the islands are, but that's just the way it works in the series. So that's the way it is. And all of these oceans cover a big area. So for example, this ocean that's over here goes all the way around the other side of the globe and just like back around. So it's just one giant ocean over here. And then this quarter of the world is another ocean over here, and then there's another quarter of the world is an ocean over here, and then there's another quarter that's an ocean over here. So I believe the area that Luffy comes from is up here, because looking at their maps, I think they come from East Blue up here. So I think this is East Blue, North Blue, South Blue, and West Blue. So Sanji is originally from West Blue, and I think everyone else comes from East Blue, except from one character later on who's from South Blue. So those are just the oceans. These thin green strips here that my arrow is pointing next to, these thin, really green strips, are known as the calm belt. And the calm belt is on either side of the middle area, which is called the Grand Line. The Grand Line is where all the big pirates go, and then on the other side is the calm belt. So what the calm belt is basically in the calm belt there is no wind, there is no weather, there is no anything. There's nothing in the calm belt except bright blue sky and calm weather. What if One Piece is just friendship? What if One Piece is the journey on their way there? Yeah, right. So anyway, in the calm belt, there is nothing. You can't sail the calm belt because underneath the surface of the water in the calm belt is a sea king breeding ground. Now, sea king is a very general term in One Piece for basically these gigantic monsters that live underneath the surface of the water. So, I mean, of course there's fish and stuff like that, but just like these big watery abominations, and like they're basically different animals. Basically, Sea King is like the general term for them. So, Sea Kings live under the calm belt, and so there's no actual way to sail from one of the major oceans into the Grand Line through the calm belt. The only ships that are able to do that are marine ships, because they line the underneath of the ships with sea stone, and because of this, the boats basically emanate the same wavelength as the sea, and so the Sea Kings just don't notice that the boats are even there, and so they don't notice anything's wrong. So only marine ships can travel over the calm belt. And then in the reverse mountain, there are all these little lines. Like, I'm moving my cursor over top of them, but you can see all these tiny little lines. These are basically like different ways in. So from each of the oceans, there's like an X coming through. So there's like an X coming from this ocean up to the center, and this one from the center, and this one from the center, and this one from the center. And then there's one that spurts out to the side. There's not one on this side, but there is one on this side. So if you come from one of the oceans up the mountain, you get spurted down the other side and into the Grand Line. And this is the only way into the Grand Line, if you're taking it the regular way. Just up the reverse mountain, into the Grand Line. And so that's basically how that works. Over on this side of the Grand Line, it's called the New World. It's just the name of the area given. So the first half of the Grand Line is over here, and it goes all the way around to the other side of the world up until this big landmass, and then the other side is over here. So there's two major parts to this big landmass. This big chunk of land that runs all the way around the globe is called the Red Line. And the Red Line is this gigantic cliff that just covers the entire world in a ring. So it's like the Red Line covers the world this way, and then the Grand Line covers the world this way. And so that's just how it works. And then one side of the Grand Line, then you have to pass through the Red Line, and then over on the other side. So it's like on the two sections where the Grand Line meets the Red Line right here, and then on the other side there are special things set up. So this monument that's on this side of the Red Line here is called the Reverse Mountain, which is basically a waterfall that runs directly up the mountain and then down into the Grand Line, something currents. On the other side of the Red Line, where the Grand Line meets the Red Line, there's just a giant cliff. And at the very bottom of the cliff, underneath the surface of the water, is a place called Fishman Island, where all the fishmen live. And on top of the Red Line is an area called Mary Joa, which is basically where all the royals live in the world. All the Tenryubito, as they're called, but they'll become characters later on as I talk about One Piece. But right now, it's just basically, this is just like the main setup of the world. So East Blue, where all this stuff has been happening so far in the series, and now they're about, and then there's a little island right here. I believe my cursor is right next to it. You see this little green island next to the next to my cursor there. I believe that's Logtown, and that's like where you go in East Blue before you go to the Grand Line. So that's pretty much a map of the world for you. And then, of course, all the oceans are dotted with islands as well. And that's basically what the world is mainly made out of, just islands. So the crew goes up the reverse mountain and down the other side, and I mean, it's nothing really that bad. I mean, it's the end of the filler, so they're fighting Eric during this time when they go up and down, but I mean, that's not really that bad. So anyway, this is the end of the East Blue Saga. When they pass over the reverse mountain, it's the start of the next big saga of that anime, the Alabasta Saga, and it's fairly long, and I'll be spending the next couple weeks talking about that. Next week, I'll be talking about Whiskey Peak, Little Garden, and Drum Island, and then the week after I'll be discussing only Alabasta, because Alabasta arc is almost 40 episodes long. It's the first gigantic arc in the series. So anyway, let's talk about Reverse Mountain. So Reverse Mountain, once they go down, they almost crash the ship into a gigantic whale. And like, they go down the reverse mountain, they're going really fast because they can't stop, and the front of the ship smashes into this whale that's just sitting out of the water. And you don't know what's going on with it, but this whale is just like bellowing out, and like, it's just really mad that Luffy punched it. So Luffy punches the whale in the eye for breaking the ship, and the whale gets really angry and it eats them. So so now they're inside the belly of this whale, and they come across, in the whale's stomach, they come across this big, it's just a bright blue sky, and they realize that there's a dude living in the whale. So Crocus has been living inside this whale all this time, and he's basically like painted the inside of the whale's stomach like this bright blue sky. So it's like he's living on the outside. So the scene where they meet Crocus is really, really funny because he's just sitting on his island reading a newspaper, and he has this really funny exchange with Sanji and Zoro, and you just gotta watch it. Like, it's just really funny. It's actually canon too. Like, I read through the Reverse Mountain arc, and it's just like a really iconic scene that's just really funny. So anyway, Crocus is a doctor, and he's been healing the inside of the whale because he keeps ramming his head against the reverse mountain. And so, because his old pirate crew basically abandoned him, and he wants to go back home. So eventually they escape from the whale, and Luffy challenges Laboon to a fight. And basically they get into like this really heated fight with a whale. And then Luffy's like, whoa, 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 hang on a sec. And he's just like, and Laboon's like, what? Because, I mean, he's just a whale. He's a gigantic whale. But at the same time, he's like, what? So, they, Luffy is just like, whoa, 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 hang on a sec. You're really strong, but I don't know, like, if you're, like, if I can beat you, but I want to fight you again when I'm stronger. So let me paint let me paint on your like snout a symbol that I will return. So Luffy paints this gigantic, ugly straw hat logo on Laboon's nose, and is like, "All right, so please don't wreck this, otherwise I'll be angry when you come back, or when I come back. So I'm gonna come back. We're gonna settle our fight, and when I come back, I really hope that your symbol isn't wrecked up." So Luffy just basically gets him to stop. Excuse me. Luffy gets him to stop ramming his face against the reverse mountain. So Laboon isn't ramming himself against the red line anymore, and Crocus is happy, and they basically wave farewell. Now, before this happens, while they're still in the whale, the Straw Hats run into this weird crew. Um, I Laboon. So they run into these characters in Laboon, and I can't actually remember their code names. One of them is, hang on, I gotta look this up. They run into these two silly people named Miss Wednesday and Mr. 12? No, it's not Mr. 12. Is it 9? Yeah, Mr. 9. Mr. 9 and Miss Wednesday. And basically they just run into them, and they're like this really like silly like couple who's like basically, I don't remember why they were in Laboon in the first place. But I mean, he's just married to Miss... No, what's going on here? Yeah, I don't remember why they were in Laboon in the first place. But either way, they find them inside the Laboon, and they're just like these really silly characters. Like there's not a whole lot that happens there. So basically, they get knocked out. They get knocked out of Laboon, and um, I can't remember exactly what happens to them. I can't remember if they lose their log. Oh, that's what happens. That's right. Okay, so it has something to do with the log. Okay, I remember. I remember now. Okay, so they wanted to kill Laboon so they could bring the whale meat to their town of Misty Peak, because that's where they were all chilling out. So they lost their log, which is a special compass you need to do the Grand Line, and I probably should have mentioned that when I talked about the Reverse Mountain, but I will now. So because I'm not going to get into Misty Peak. So anyway, they met up with the Straw Hats, and then they're just like, well, we don't have a log, so we don't know how to get home. So the Straw Hats decide to give them a ride back to their town, because that's the direction that their log is pointing. So part of me is like, I can't remember how they got their log in the first place. I think Crocus gives it to them, because in the anime, it's a little different than the manga because of the filler arc. Um, the filler arc is the filler arc throws in a bunch of extra stuff in Reverse Mountain. Either way, basically they just get upset by the Straw Hats, and there's really nothing that they can do. So they're like, okay, we're gonna give you a ride to Misty Peak, and then that'll be that. So I don't think anything was really revealed to them, but basically when they landed on Misty Peak, Miss Wednesday and Mr. 9 jumped overboard, and they just jumped overboard and then swam to the island and were like, okay, bye. And then the Straw Hats were like, okay, well, okay. So that's pretty much it for that. I wish I would have left Laboon talking about Laboon until next time, because what I'm talking about right now definitely fills into the rest of the beginning of the arc here, but it's just what it is. So, like I said before, Laboon and Crocus are talked about a little later on in the series. I'm not going to discuss them much now, but I did mention before that Crocus was the doctor on the Pirate King ship, so obviously he knows who Shanks and Buggy and Rayleigh are as well. And so it's just really cool, like, you don't know that here, it's just like, oh, this crazy old man is, like, tending to a whale at this part in the series. But then later on, like, 300 episodes down the line, you'll find that out. And I didn't give a warning at the beginning of today's episode, but I did last week, so my apologies for any of that. But there will be spoilers up until the beginning of the time skip, because I'm not going to talk about anything after the time skip until after the time skip. So anyway, that's it for Reverse Mountain this week. I don't really have anything to say about any of the characters introduced there. Crocus and Laboon are pretty eh. For Logetown, I guess one thing that I could summarize with Smoker is that Smoker is like a really cool character. The way they did him in the 4Kids dub was kind of good and bad, I feel like. They changed his name from Smoker to Chaser because, I mean, you can't make any references to smoking because then kids will start smoking. But, I mean, it's just how 4Kids does it. But Smoker always has 2 cigars sticking out of his mouth because he's always smoking 2 cigars at the same time. And in the dub, obviously they couldn't have him smoking, so they just removed the cigars, but they kept the smoke there, so it's like smoke is like always just randomly emanating from his mouth. And I think that was like a pretty decent edit, in my opinion, just because like he's made of smoke, right? So, I mean, it makes sense that he would have smoke coming out of his mouth. So, I mean, that's just the way it is there. So yeah, that was a pretty decent edit. 4Kids edited the execution scene pretty heavily in Logetown as well, I remember. Um, it's really weird what they do and don't edit out. It almost seems inconsistent, but I mean, I don't really remember a lot of the Logetown edits because Logetown is just not. It was an okay arc, but I mean, the only good episode in the arc, in my opinion, was the one where Zoro buys his swords. And then all the stuff that happens with Luffy and Buggy and Smoker and Dragon and all that, it's like, whatever, let's just move on to the next thing. So, that's it for today's episode of GDO Show. It wasn't as long as it was last week, but I think going around for around 2 hours is usually pretty good for me. Next week on the GDO show, unless something else comes up, because every now and again something else could come up that I might want to talk about instead of One Piece. One Piece is just the overlying thing. I'll tweet about it later on the week if anything comes up, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be talking about this. Next week on the GDO show, I'll be discussing One Piece again. I'll be talking about the next couple arcs leading up to the showdown in Alabasta. Because this is the Misty Peak and Reverse Mountain are the very start of the Alabasta arc, and these 2 weird characters, Miss Wednesday and Mr. 9, are basically characters leading up to it. So, yeah, next week on GDO Show, I'm going to be discussing my thoughts and opinions on the characters and the arcs for Misty Peak, Little Garden, and Drum Island. as and that's about it. I don't think I'll be talking about anything else. And then the following week, I will only be talking about Alabasta. So, um, get ready for Alabasta because I have a lot to talk about there. Lot of characters introduced in Alabasta that are foreshadowed forward. So anyway, I don't have anything else to talk about. I'm gonna end my final split there. Um, I don't think I'll play music um, leading out of this show just because I'm going to be streaming more. So tune in if you want to keep watching me play through the Zelda ROM hack. Um, Typical shoutouts for now. If you are on Twitch and like watching Zelda, follow my friend Luxurious Lady at twitch.tv slash Luxurious Lady. She does a lot of Zelda stuff, and it would be really cool if you gave her some love, as well as my coworker Hybrid Theory 007, Hybrid Theory 007, and I mean that's pretty much. He streams World of Warships, but it's not a very exciting game to follow. But I mean, he's got a really chill stream, so tune in and just have his stream open. Try to get him affiliate. That'd be nice. If you're watching on twitch.tv and want to watch these episodes again, I upload them to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/GarageDoorOpener, except the O in opener is a 0. So that's Garage Door, 0 PENER. If you're watching on youtube.com, I stream these live every Friday night or Friday evening at 5 p.m. PST at twitch.tv/GarageDoorOpener, except the O is a O, just as I originally intended. So that's GARAGEDOOR for both, and then OPENER or 0 PENER, depending on whether or not you're watching on Twitch or YouTube. If you're watching live on Twitch, you get the option to chat with me during the shows. Maybe I might read off some of the stuff, or if you're just chatting with me about the show, then it's good. And if you're watching on YouTube, you leave a YouTube comment, or you can email me questions at thegdoshow@gmail.com. So that's it for all that stuff. I'm done for the week. Well, done for the GDO show for the day. I'm going to quickly get up and get some food, and then I will continue streaming my Zelda ROM hack. So I hope you guys enjoy your night if you are not going to be tuning in. And here is the backdrop one more time for my extra, because I do not have a picture yet, but I'm sure I will make one day. So have a good night, y'all. See you next week.